So in this video I'm going to be discussing Souls bosses I either had more or less trouble with than the community. By community I mean the common opinion I see on these bosses on YouTube hardness tier lists, Twitter, Reddit and so on. One disclaimer, I never played Demon Souls, Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2, so this list obviously has to exclude bosses from those games. And yes, this is my first video ever not specifically about Elden Ring. Wow! Variety content! Alright, let's go. So first I'm gonna talk about Dark Souls 1 and Sekiro, because for those games I can't really pinpoint specific bosses where my opinion differs a lot. In Sekiro, I think every single boss was harder for me than for the average Soulsborne player. It took me so long to learn Sekiro's combat mechanics, maybe because I had played Dark Souls 3 and Dark Souls 1 beforehand and got very used to the classic Souls combat, or maybe I just suck. Whatever the case, Sekiro murdered me. For the hell of it, I couldn't figure out how to fight the Headless, so I just ended up completely avoiding them. And for like half of the game's bosses, I was like, nah, this seems way too hard, I must be in the wrong area. But that was almost never the case, and then I bashed my head into a wall over and over again until I finally beat them. Bruh, even this guy gave me trouble because I didn't realize I just had to deflect all the time. I think I may have had slightly less trouble than the community with Owl and the Guardian Ape, but I unfortunately got spoiled for the Guardian Ape's revival, so I was kinda ready for that from the beginning. All in all, Sekiro's combat just didn't click for me. Every single boss gave me more trouble than the Soulsborne community, it seems. By the way, I'd easily rank Ishin as the hardest Soulsborne boss, even over the likes of Millennia. For Dark Souls 1, it's kind of the other way around. I played it after Dark Souls 3, so I already had some experience, which made my time significantly easier, I think. Also, the game is of course a little old, so combat is much slower and straightforward. I have to mention, I never played the DLC, I bet the bosses in there would have absolutely destroyed me. But in the base game, there were definitely some bosses who gave me trouble, but overall, with the experience I had from Dark Souls 3, I was able to take down most of them quickly. Now on to Dark Souls 3, the game where my opinion on boss difficulty differs the most from what I've heard on the internet. Dark Souls 3 was my first Souls game, so Gandia and Vought already kicked my ass. But I don't want to use my inexperience as an excuse. I think it definitely took me longer than the average player to finally learn how to deal with Vought. The Cursed Rotten Greatwood also wasn't as easy for me as for other players. I had to figure out its weak spots first, and I was kinda overwhelmed by all the hollows in the arena sometimes. Even the Crystal Sage was a little more challenging to me than for other players, I think, but I wasn't stuck on him or anything. Then Abyss Watchers were hard for everyone, I think, I'm on board with that, but then Volnir. Man, I don't know what it was in my first playthrough, but I was stuck on him for a good while. I can't exactly remember why, maybe I didn't figure out I had to attack his rings at first, but even then I remember being so overwhelmed by all the skeletons and the arena being consumed by the abyss when you took too long. It was very stressful. So Volnir was harder for me than for most players. But don't even get me started on Pontiff Sullivan. That guy was an absolute nightmare for me. I obviously hadn't figured out how to properly parry at that point. To be honest, I still haven't in Dark Souls 3, so I couldn't utilize that to make him easier. His rapid movement and swift attacks were just too much for me, and I rarely found windows to heal. Even now, having replayed the game multiple times, I don't really look forward to this fight. Pontiff Sullivan will always be challenging for me. Then for those mid to late game bosses, my opinion is mostly on board with the communities. But 3 bosses I want to highlight are Dancer, Champion Gandia and Nameless King. I've seen people rank Dancer relatively high when talking about difficulty, and I'd say she's moderate. I think what helped me a lot was knowing I had to go for her cheeks when attacking, because I heard that you should try to stay close to a lot of bosses somewhere. So that knowledge led to me figuring out a strat to fight her relatively soon, and so she didn't mean too much trouble. Champion Gandia destroyed me though. As mentioned, I'm not great at parrying in Dark Souls 3, so I couldn't utilize that too much. And if you've ever fought Champion Gandia without being good at parrying, I think you know the pain this guy can be. His movement is so rapid and he never lets you breathe. Not only does he slash, poke and stab you with his giant halberd, he will also just straight up punch, kick and shoulder bash you. That guy is no joke. Well, at least for me, because from what I've seen online, people seem to not have a lot of trouble with this fight. Maybe what I've seen and read all came from parry gods, but oh boy, I'm just too stressed to concentrate on parrying in that fight. Champion Gandia is a great boss, but he will always mean trouble for me. Nameless King. This guy is always in the top row of Dark Souls 3 hardness tier lists. And I agree, he is certainly challenging. I'm not saying that he was easy for me, but I feel like Twin Princess took me way more tries. Maybe I was just particularly bad at Twin Princess, but I honestly don't remember struggling too hard at Nameless King. I'd say I struggled a normal amount. He was in no way a pushover or anything, but I also didn't rage or had to take breaks to calm my nerves. It was a healthy struggle, I'd say. Now let's get on to the DLCs. And I'm not trying to portray myself as a god gamer or anything, but Sister Fried and Gale? Not too bad. Not saying they are boring, just a little underwhelming. Okay, I'm kidding, of course. Or am I? Well, Sister Fried is a brutal boss. I was mind blown when she suddenly stood up again after I already killed her twice. It's one of the best fights in Souls history. But my Fume Ultra Greatsword just kept on staggering her. I did a lot of damage with every single hit I could get off. And with my hits, I usually interrupted her actions for a brief moment. And that's pretty much how I beat her without struggling too much. It was kinda the same as with Nameless King. It was hard, but it never felt impossible. And so I had to go through a healthy amount of studying her moveset until I finally defeated her. Another contender for best fight in Souls history, Slave Knight Gale. But for him, I legit can't say I struggled a healthy amount. I think I beat him on like my third try. I don't know why, I probably got lucky, but yeah, I didn't die to Gale as much as I would have wanted to. I don't know, it just felt like his moves were pretty intuitive. It's a very fair fight, not much bullshit involved. Looking at you, Elden Ring bosses, I'd say the most bullshit aspect of his fight is when he suddenly pulls out a crossbow. But that's not Ishin levels of fuck you, pulls out gun. From phase 2 on, his cloak kind of acts as an extension of his blade, so your rolls have to be more precise. But I feel like all I did was wait a few milliseconds more to roll and that solved phase 2. Again, I was using my trusty Fume Ultra Greatsword, so every time I actually found a window to attack, it would deal a considerable amount of damage. I was basically dodging, found a window, Fume Ultra Greatsword R1, big damage, dodging, running, dodging, oh there's a window, Fume Ultra Greatsword R1, big damage, rinse and repeat. And like that, Gale wasn't too bad. But there's one last DLC boss I want to talk about, and for that one it was quite the opposite. Dark Eater Medea, the best, most epic and challenging dragon fight From Software ever created. In all of Dark Souls 3, no boss gave me as much trouble as Medea. And I know he's usually very high on hardness tier lists, but I think I definitely struggled more than the average player. I just couldn't figure out where to attack him, where to position myself, and how to dodge some of his attacks, what to look out for. It was bad, it was really bad, but I enjoyed every second of it. Where I missed out on an epic showdown with Gale, Medea made that up. I also fought Medea after Gale, because to be honest, even finding Medea was already hard. So beating him after hours and hours was probably the highest high I ever experienced in Souls games, and maybe even all of my gaming career. Dark Eater Medea concluded Dark Souls 3 for me, and I couldn't have asked for a better ending. And last but not least, Elden Ring. For Elden Ring, it's safe to say that opinions on difficulty differ the most, because it depends on how much you explore and in what order you do the bosses. Still, I feel like there's a general consensus on most of them, which I will orientate myself on. Starting off, super early, not even a main boss, in a cave in Limgrave. But demi-human chiefs? You guys think they are easy? Huh? You know there are like 8 demi-humans in that cave too, right? Did we fight the same demi-human chiefs? They have weird delayed attacks, long attack combos, and way too many minions. All that in this tight space? This fight is hard, man. If you accidentally aggro the sleeping one in the back of the cave, you can already forget that attempt. That will just be too much to handle. But even if you don't, you have to deal with 3 demi-humans, a demi-human chief with savage combos and delayed attacks in a tight and dark space, while having to stay in a certain area of that space, because otherwise you will attract even more demi-humans and another demi-human chief. And all that in the early game? With like 3 flasks and an unupgraded short spear? Respect to anyone who calls demi-human chiefs easy. Gale is nothing compared to that boss fight. Okay, well, let's see here. Margit just depends on how much you explore. All the dragons are easy if you fight them on horseback. Renala is a pushover, or at least if you're not an intelligence build. Radahn is very hard without summons, but completely fair with them. Death birds are easy, while death red birds are the bane of my existence. Thank God for holy damage, I will always love you even if you suck ass for 50% of the game. Oh wait, I forgot a boss. This motherfucker. Holy shit, this dog is no joke. He knows magic and then jumps at you, so you always have to focus on two things at once. And if you get hit, that's pretty high damage too. At least your damage will be high as well. Radagon's Red Wolf is the definition of a glass cannon, but he's so fast and agile and does so much damage and knows so many sorceries. I may be able to beat him quickly now that I've played this game for like 600 hours, but I still think he's much harder than people say. Oh, another one. You guys think Element of the Briar is easy? I don't know who, but I swear I heard someone say that in a YouTube video. Element of the Briar. Easy. Are you out of your mind? Please teach me your ways, because that guy and his goddamn flying sword will never not destroy me. When do I heal against this guy? Anytime I try to run away, I get shoulder bashed to the ground or pinned down by the corkscrew attack. When I think I see a window, after he just smashed his shield into the ground, he suddenly pulls it out with an explosion. And anytime I try to move in this tiny ass room, I suddenly have a flying sword slashing through my guts. Also, why are there so many of these guys? Element of the Briar easy. I can't believe it. Oh, the Valiant Gargoyles weren't that bad for me, but I think that's mostly because I do them later than a lot of other players. But the single Black Blade Gargoyle? How do you actually beat those? Like, I really need some advice, cause they will just kick my ass if I don't cheese them. Why are those big ass things allowed to move so fast, build up tornadoes and pull out massive axes mid-battle? Yeah, single gargoyles are way too hard. For remembrance bosses, I mostly agree with the general opinion. I don't know if everyone would agree here, but I think Estelle is easy as shit if he doesn't do the damn grab attack. Godfrey is pretty predictable, but Horalu WWE slammed my ass into the ground. Elden Beast is pretty easy, but Radagon will first drain out like 10 of my heal flasks, and I think we can all agree that Melania is the hardest fight ever made, after Sword and Pistol, Saint Ishin of course. One remembrance boss I feel like we need to talk more about though is Mo Lord of Blood. His delayed attacks are so hard to dodge. Then he does his satanic give me your health chant and then his second phase starts. And Mo's second phase? I hate Mo's second phase. How is it fair that the entire ground is suddenly covered in blood flame? Blood flame? Bleed buildup and fire damage? Bruh, I can't go anywhere without taking damage, constantly having to look out for that damn bleed buildup. And while micromanaging my positioning, I still have to deal with delayed attacks that have extra follow-ups now. And half of the time he jumps into the air and I can't even hit him. Mo's second phase is so hard for me, man. And while he's always pretty high on difficulty tier lists, I'd still put him higher. And I think that's every boss I wanted to talk about. So without further ado, here's my top 5 hardest Souls bosses ever made.
Number 5. Mo's second phase. Number 4. Dark Eater Medea. Number 3. The Rod Tussie. Number 2. Glock Saint Ishin. And number 1. Demi-Human Chiefs.